Welcome to this program, 4-part series on an introduction to governance. You'll notice that I left out the word corporate governance because I don't want you to get the impression that it's the corporate that are involved. This is geared very much to an introduction to private companies, SMEs, and entrepreneurial businesses that have decided to take their business to the next level. The program will be in 4 parts. Firstly, conceptual, which we'll touch on now. Secondly, we'll look at strategy and risk because that is fundamental to every single business and everything flows out of your strategy. Thirdly, we'll look at directors' duties, fiduciary duties and obligations and liabilities. And in the 4th part of this series, we'll look at governance, the systems, the tools, the processes that are available to you to implement in your business. Let's start off with what is governance. Governance is essentially, one definition, is how to direct and control your business to ensure that directors meet their fiduciary / legal obligations. Personally, I'm not really in favor of that definition. Why? Because it implies that A, it's a big business, and secondly, directors are just looking to protect themselves rather than looking for performance of the business. I can understand this perception, and I think if you go out and did a survey of business leaders today, you would find that more than 50% would come back and tell you that governance is about corporates and bureaucracy. Again, I can understand it. Why? Is because King 3 was what created that perception. It consisted of 75 items that had to be considered and ticked off every year. And if you didn't comply with one of the items, you had to write why. So it was apply or explain. Now, for a developing business or a smaller private business to go through 75 items annually is actually just bureaucratic. And that's why it never gained traction to any great extent. And why smaller companies kept on saying, we can't apply this sort of governance. It has been addressed. King 4 has come back, recognized this, and it's now outcomes-based. So to begin with, you're saying, what do you want to achieve? And the 4 items are an ethical organization, secondly, good performance, thirdly, effective control, and fourthly, legitimacy. The new definition, the one that I like, is what is governance? It's effective leadership. Everybody wants effective leadership. So now we're looking at the outcomes, and then King has presented 16 principles. So it's moved from a 75-item checklist where you used to find at the end of the year, a financial director would phone you and say, we're doing the integrated report. There are 5 items that we don't comply with. What should I write? That's not the objective of governance. The objective of governance is to actually decide what you're going to do, implement it, and run with it. And that's what King 4 now does. It says, here's 16 principles. Behind every principle, he's given us a whole lot of recommended practices. You decide which practices are relevant to achieve that principle. If none of them are relevant, you don't adopt any. It depends on the size and the state and the growth cycle, whether it's growth, maturity, or declining. Startup, you decide what's appropriate for your business, and that's what you implement. So you implement it, and you explain why you're doing it to achieve the principle. Very different. So in actual fact, you do it, you set it up, you put it on your website, you file it, and that's how the company will operate. So all you do on an ongoing basis is if you create a problem, or you hit a problem, should I say, you then go back and say, what should we have done? Do we need to change any of the processes that we're working with? So in essence, the fundamentals have changed. It's now geared towards business. So which businesses should be considering it? In theory, every business registered in the country or resident in the country is subject to king. King is not law, it's a principle. So when will it apply? If you end up in court, if there's no legal process, if there's no precedent in terms of case law, the judges will turn to best practice, and king is recognized as best practice. So it would be expected of a director to have implemented some form of best practice. Hence, you have to sit down, you have to look at the principles and decide. So let's just move one step back again. Who's involved? Let's talk about an entrepreneur in the first instance. When you run a business, your arms are around it. You can control it, you know what's going on, you can sense it, you walk into your operation, you can feel it, you can see it, you can smell it, you can almost taste it if something's wrong. You can see if there's a package which has been wrapped up, lying at dispatch for the last 3 weeks, collecting dust. You know, you're going to go and ask what's going on. The problem is when you start growing. I open a second site. I cannot now get my arms around it. Now I'm relying on somebody to close the gap for total control. Previously, I didn't need reports. Now I need a report. I need to know what's going on the other side. I pop in there every morning, but I don't live it, I don't eat it, I don't sleep it. I need somebody, so I need processes, I need controls. Hence the concept in King 4, I want integrity, ethics, I want good performance, and I want effective control. Legitimacy we'll talk about later, and we'll expand on those as we go through. So that's the first instance that you're going to start having to introduce some form of governance to give you peace of mind that things are happening. The second instance is where you don't have 100% control of the entity in terms of shareholding. When I'm 100% shareholder, I'm the chairman, I'm the CEO, it's my business, I run it, I do what I want to. Yes, I'm exposed to other stakeholders, but I don't have other shareholders. If I start giving away some of those shares or sell some of those shares, particularly to people who aren't involved in the day-to-day business, my exposure just increases. Now I need confidence for myself, and the person investing needs to have confidence that things are being run relatively well. Having said that, please understand the background to any sort of governance is there because the human being is greedy. If there wasn't greed around in the human being, we wouldn't need all these processes and principles in place. And you can see what's happened over time. Over time, we've had the Enrons of this world internationally. Presently, we're grappling, we're just starting to understand what happened to the Steinoffs. Underlying element, greed. So we need to control that sort of thing, and you need to have processes and things telling you what's going on so that you can pick it up early enough before it gets out of hand. What are the elements of governance? What are we looking for? I like to look at it as a building. The foundation is integrity. If you don't have integrity in the building, your foundation is going to collapse, your pillars, your whole building is going to fall down. So that's the first and utmost importance. Easy to talk about, easy to philosophize about, but a lot of it depends on your belief system as the owner, manager, major shareholder versus a lot of other people who have belief systems, come from different backgrounds, different exposures, but generally, the more people you've got discussing it, the more likely you are to create the right sort of integrity in your business. The pillars involved, first and foremost, fairness. Again, an easy concept to talk about. If we go to the Marikana incident, was 12,500 rand for a rock driller the right salary? Wasn't it? It's easy to talk about, but there's more than just, can I live on 12,500 a month? You have to look at what the company can afford. You have to look at what other people are doing. What is the going rate? What is the competitive rate? What are the needs of the community? Easier said than done. And in doing the bigger course, we talk about a lot of case studies which actually show you how people have taken decisions to do certain things in the interests of the greater workforce, which comes back and creates a major problem for the organization. Easier said than done, but you need to, in everything you do, to try and put yourself in the other person's position and say, is this fair? Second two concepts are responsibility and accountability. I'll talk to them together. You can Google definitions of both, but the way I like to look at it is, the board is accountable. Directors are accountable for everything that happens in the organization. You can give away responsibility. You can say to somebody, you're responsible to do X, Y, and Z within these parameters. If they don't do it, you're still accountable. So you cannot give away accountability. That's why you need governance, to make sure there are parameters within which they are working so that you don't become liable at the end of the day. Then you've got to have transparency. You cannot, for example, go out and sign an agreement with a supplier that we will pay you in 30 days when you categorically know that you're not capable of doing that relative to your cash flows and where you are at that point in time in your business. So you need to be transparent. It doesn't mean you must give away sensitive information or your strategic type information. I'll give you a case study. I've actually changed the names and some of the detail because it could be sensitive, but a lot of it was in the media. A listed entity has its commercial director arrested on the 5th of March in a particular year for alleged bribery. 5 million payment to a senior officer in the police in order to be awarded a contract. That was the alleged crime. Nothing is said. 5 days later, the company presents its half-year results to the investment community without saying a word. 10 days after that, the CEO sells 24 million rands worth of shares. 5 days later, they come to the market and say, by the way, an executive director has been arrested for alleged fraud. The share price overnight drops from 20 to 11 rand. What is the perception of the community, be it investment community, be it the workers, be it whoever, of that company and of the leadership in that company? When queried, why didn't you declare it straight away? The company turned around and said, we consulted with our legal advisors. They said it was not a necessity. So legally, they did nothing wrong. But life is about perception. It's not what's right or wrong from a legal perspective. It's about perception. It's not what you say, it's what you get heard to say. And again, the perception, the reputational damage that transpired because of what happened was enormous. And in actual fact, when you go and look at the detail in defense of the company, the accusations were ridiculous. 5 million payout when they were going to make about 12 million rand gross profit. Would you pay someone 5 million rand to make 12 million gross profit in a listed environment, in a multi-billion rand organization? I doubt it. Secondly, the sale of shares from the CEO was a collared transaction. It was something that was entered into 3 days prior. 3 years, sorry, not days, 3 years prior. It was going to happen. There was a bottom price and there was a ceiling price. So it would not have had a major effect even if the share price had dropped. So nothing tells you that anything underhand was going on. If they had come out and actually told the community what was going on, they would have salvaged their reputation. And that's the transparency that we're talking about in this regard. The most important thing is going through the principles, and there's no shortcut. You have to work through the principle, you have to work through the recommended practices, and you have to decide what you as an organization are going to do. It's about protection of your company, it's about protection of yourself, it's about performance, and it's about effective control. Those are the important elements. And there's no business. That's why I like the definition of effective leadership, because there is no business that doesn't want an ethical organization, good performance, effective controls, and legitimacy. Legitimacy is an interesting one because a company is a separate entity. It's a separate legal entity subject to the Constitution. So it's going to be judged in that base. As directors, as employees, as managers, we are just officers of that entity. But we have to make sure that it complies with the Constitution. And the interesting thing is, with social media today, there's a natural force out there. If you step out of line in terms of legitimacy, you are going to be punished on social media instantly today. And it gathers pace at a huge rate, and it's all about reputation. So you have to be aware of it, and you have to have the right controls. It's not difficult. If I look at one of the very first principles in terms of ethics, generally if you've got a code of conduct policy, you will cover yourself because you're telling your employees, this is how we expect you to conduct yourself. This is how we expect you to conduct business. Your suppliers will be exposed to it. It's those sorts of things. They're not difficult, but it does involve a bit of upfront work. Get involved, do it, and then put it onto your website or put it into the system that you run, and then you just monitor it when you have a problem. And as you grow, you'll find you'll be introducing more and more in terms of governance. But please, it's not a corporate issue anymore. It applies to every company. Having said that, if I'm 100% one-man show, I don't need anyone to tell me what to do with my business. I don't need to write codes of conduct. I am the code of conduct. Everything is led from the top. It's when I'm starting to lose control in terms of my own capabilities of putting my hands around the business and I can contain it. And that's where it starts going wrong. Entrepreneurs don't like it. But the fact is, it's for your own benefit and it's in the interests of the organization.